The sun scorched South Bend, Indiana, on a blistering July noon in 2025, the kind of heat that made the air shimmer above the asphalt and turned every breath into a labor. Franklin Avenue, the city's crown jewel of luxury, gleamed under the relentless sunlight. Glass storefronts of Chanel, Louis Vuitton, and artisanal cafes reflected wealth in their polished surfaces, while sleek Teslas and BMWs glided silently past, their drivers cocooned in air-conditioned comfort. The avenue was a world of tailored suits, designer sunglasses, and the soft clink of espresso cups, a place where money spoke louder than words, and appearances dictated belonging. Amid this pristine scene, a solitary figure emerged, cutting through the polished crowd like a shadow against a spotlight. Malcolm Everett, 47, didn't belong, not at first glance. His dark brown coat, once perhaps a fine piece, was now faded, its seams fraying at the shoulders, stained with years of wear. His shoes, scuffed and worn, whispered of miles traveled on unforgiving roads. In his right hand he clutched a yellowed paperback, its spine cracked, pages dog-eared. His left hand stayed buried in his coat pocket, as if guarding something no one could see. His eyes, deep and black, carried a calm that was both unsettling and magnetic, as if he knew exactly where he was and chose to be there anyway. Malcolm crossed the pedestrian line with deliberate steps, his presence drawing sharp glances from the crowd. A middle-aged woman in oversized Gucci sunglasses tugged her daughter's arm, stepping back as if Malcolm's shadow might stain her white sundress. A barista at a nearby cafe craned his neck, pausing mid-pour to stare. No one spoke, but their eyes sliced through the air like knives, labeling him outsider, drifter, trouble. Malcolm didn't flinch. He stopped in front of Café Étoile, a French-style bistro with cream-colored umbrellas and delicate glass vases on every table. He stood still, reading the menu board posted outside, his gaze steady, as if the world's judgment couldn't touch him. The street held its breath. One beat, then two. Then chaos erupted. A delivery truck, its brakes squealing, swerved wildly at the intersection, its tires screeching against the pavement. The driver, a young man in a sweat-soaked cap, leaned out the window, cursing as he fought to regain control. The truck veered toward a group of shoppers, who screamed and scattered like startled birds. A stroller tipped over, a baby's wail piercing the air. The truck screeched to a halt, inches from a glass storefront, its engine coughing as the crowd erupted in shouts and gasps. Across the street, Officer Calvin Holt, 52, snapped to attention. His dark blue uniform was crisp, his nameplate gleaming. Holt C. A veteran of the South Bend Police Department, Holt carried himself with the weight of authority, his gray eyes sharp as razors, his jaw set like stone. Beside him in the patrol car sat Officer Ethan Caldwell, 28, his cap slightly askew, sweat beading on his clean-shaven face. Ethan's hand rested on the radio, his eyes locked on the chaos unfolding. But Holt's gaze wasn't on the truck. It was on Malcolm. "That guy," Holt muttered, his voice low, venomous. "He's the one who caused this." Ethan frowned, glancing at Malcolm, who hadn't moved from the cafe's entrance. "Sir, he's just standing there." "Don't argue, Caldwell," Holt snapped, his eyes never leaving Malcolm. "Look at him. Torn coat, old book, standing like he owns the place. That's not normal on Franklin. That's trouble." Ethan hesitated, his fingers tightening on the radio. He'd been on the force for 3 years, trained to trust his instincts, but Holt's instincts were something else, something darker, honed by decades of seeing the world through a lens of suspicion. Ethan keyed the radio, his voice steady but uncertain. "This is Unit 7-4. Observing an unidentified male exhibiting suspicious behavior in front of Café Étoile, Franklin Avenue. Requesting backup." A crackle, then a calm voice replied, "Copy 7-4. Proceed to engage. Backup en route." Holt was already out of the car, his boots striking the pavement with purpose. The crowd parted for him, their murmurs fading as he approached Malcolm. Ethan followed, his heart pounding, his hand hovering near his holster, not out of fear, but because Holt's presence demanded it. The air thickened, the heat pressing down like a physical weight. Malcolm didn't look up. He kept reading the menu, his fingers tracing the edge of his book. Holt stopped 3 steps away, hands on hips, head tilted, his gaze raking over Malcolm from head to toe. "Hey!" Holt barked, his voice cutting through the street's hum. "What the hell are you doing here?" Malcolm's eyes shifted from the menu to Holt's face, calm and unyielding. "Reading the menu," he said, his tone flat, like a professor answering a distracted student. "I'm hungry. Maybe a coffee." Holt's smirk curled cold and mocking. "You think I'm stupid? You don't belong here, pal. This is a high-end area. You're scaring off customers, looking like you crawled out of a dumpster." Malcolm didn't blink. "I don't object to you checking me," he said, his voice steady. "But I'm just standing here. That's not a crime." Holt's eyes narrowed, his smirk fading. He wasn't used to this someone who didn't cower, didn't argue, just stood there meeting his stare. He pulled black gloves from his pocket, slipping them on with deliberate slowness, each finger a silent threat. "Empty your pockets. Now." The crowd grew still. A teenage girl, phone in hand, started recording, her hands trembling. A man in a tailored suit glanced over, then turned away, as if Malcolm's existence was a stain on his perfect day. Ethan stood silent, his jaw tight, watching Holt's every move. He'd seen his superior handle disruptive subjects before, but something about this felt different, wrong. Malcolm didn't move. He spoke slow and clear, each word landing like a stone. "According to the Fourth Amendment, unless you have a warrant or I'm under arrest, you don't have the right to search me." The street froze. Holt's face darkened, his glove half on, his breath catching. Ethan's eyes widened, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. The crowd murmured, the girl's phone capturing every second. Holt stepped closer, his voice a low growl. "You think you're a lawyer now? You don't know where you're standing, do you?" Malcolm's gaze didn't waver. "I know exactly where I'm standing," he said. "The question is, do you?" Holt's hand shot out, grabbing Malcolm's wrist and yanking him forward. The force sent Malcolm stumbling, his knee hitting the pavement hard, blood seeping through his torn pants. The crowd gasped, the girl's phone shaking as she zoomed in. "Stop resisting," Holt shouted, though Malcolm hadn't moved to fight back. He twisted Malcolm's arm, slamming him against the glass wall of Café Etoile. The impact echoed, a deep, violent thud that silenced the street. A woman inside the cafe dropped her glass pitcher, shards scattering across the floor. A baby's cry cut through the air. Ethan stepped back, his face pale, his hand clenching his belt. He'd never seen someone take pain like this, silent, steady, as if it was just another day. Malcolm's cheek pressed against the glass, sweat trailing down his temple, his eyes still calm, still unbroken. "You're nothing," Holt spat, loud enough for the whole street to hear. "Trash. No ID, no address, no reason to be here. What are you, huh?" He reached into Malcolm's coat pocket, rummaging through it like he was digging through garbage. A few coins, a folded piece of paper, and a chipped fountain pen clattered to the pavement. Then a soft clink. Something heavier fell, rolling across the stone. A metal card, scratched and dulled, glinted in the sunlight. Thicker than a credit card, its edges worn, it landed near Malcolm's foot. Holt scoffed, stepping halfway on it with his boot. "What's this? Some fake badge you bought at a flea market." He kicked it aside, the card skidding toward the crowd. Ethan crouched, picking it up, his fingers brushing the engraved surface. His breath caught as he read the text. United States Supreme Court Associate Justice. Active clearance, Federal Code 11B. Ethan's hands shook, his throat tightening. He looked up at Malcolm, then back at the badge. "Captain," he rasped, his voice barely audible. "You need to see this." Holt froze, his hand still in Malcolm's pocket. The crowd fell silent, the air heavy with anticipation. A teenage boy live streaming on TikTok zoomed in on the badge, his voice trembling. "Yo, that's a Supreme Court badge. They're messing with a federal judge." The video's view count skyrocketed, comments flooding in. "This is insane. South Bend PD is done. Who is this guy?" Holt turned, his gray eyes flickering with something rare uncertainty. He snatched the badge from Ethan, holding it to the light. For a split second his face betrayed him, a crack in his iron facade. He knew what it was. He knew he'd crossed a line. But he couldn't back down, not in front of the crowd, not with phones recording his every move. "Black folks faking badges now, huh?" Holt sneered, his voice loud, unapologetic. He tossed the badge back to the pavement, where it landed with a dull thud. The crowd erupted, voices rising in anger. A young woman shouted, "You can't do that." A man in a delivery uniform stepped forward, fists clenched. "That's a judge, man. You're screwed." Malcolm said nothing. His cheek still pressed against the glass, his eyes locked on the badge lying in the dirt. He didn't need to speak. The truth was speaking for him, louder than any shout, sharper than any weapon. Ethan stood frozen, the badge's weight lingering in his mind. He'd been trained to follow orders, to trust his superior, but this was something else. This was a man who'd once stood at the pinnacle of justice, now bleeding on a South Bend sidewalk. Holt yanked Malcolm's collar, pulling him upright. "You're coming with us," he growled, shoving him toward the patrol car. But the crowd was moving now, closing in, phones raised like shields. A college student, her voice shaking, yelled, "We're recording this. You can't hide." A mother, clutching her son's hand, stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "Why are you doing this?" "He didn't do anything." Ethan's radio crackled. Backup units reporting their arrival. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. The street was a powder keg, every glance, every shout a spark waiting to ignite. Holt's jaw clenched, his hand gripping his baton. "Everyone back off," he roared. "This is a police matter." But the crowd didn't back off. They surged closer, their voices blending into a single unyielding demand. "Let him go." The teenage boy's livestream hit 1 million views, the hashtag South Bend Injustice trending nationwide. News vans were already en route, their satellites rising like vultures circling a kill. Malcolm, still silent, met Ethan's eyes for the first time. There was no anger, no plea, just a quiet question, as if asking, "What will you do now?" Ethan's heart pounded, his training warring with his conscience. He'd never questioned Holt before, never doubted the chain of command. But the badge on the ground, the blood on Malcolm's knee, the crowd's cries, they were louder than any order. "Captain," Ethan said, his voice low but firm, "we need to verify this badge. Now." Holt spun, his eyes blazing. "You questioning me, Caldwell? You think this guy's some big shot? He's a fraud." But his voice cracked, just enough for Ethan to hear the doubt. The crowd sensed it too, their shouts growing louder, their phones capturing every second of Holt's unraveling. A second patrol car screeched to a halt, officers spilling out, their hands on their holsters. The tension was electric, the air crackling with the promise of violence. A woman in the crowd, her voice raw, screamed, "This is about his skin, isn't it? You wouldn't do this to a white man in a suit." Holt's face twisted, his control slipping. He grabbed Malcolm's arm, dragging him toward the car. "Move now." But Malcolm didn't resist, didn't fight. He walked, his head high, his eyes scanning the crowd, not for help, but as if memorizing their faces, their courage, their anger. The teenage boy, still live-streaming, followed, his camera shaking. "They're arresting a Supreme Court judge," he shouted, his voice breaking. "This is South Bend 2025. And this is what they do to black men." The video's view count climbed past 2 million. Comments pouring in from across the country. "This is America. Shut it down. Who is he?" As Holt shoved Malcolm into the patrol car, the badge lay forgotten on the pavement, its scratched surface catching the sunlight. A young girl, no older than 10, darted forward, snatching it before anyone could stop her. She held it up, her small hands trembling, and shouted, "This is real. You can't pretend it's not." The crowd roared, their voices a tidal wave. Holt slammed the car door, his face a mask of rage and fear. Ethan stood by the car, his hands shaking, his mind racing. He'd seen the badge. He'd read the words. And he knew deep in his gut that everything was about to change. The precinct was a fortress of concrete and fluorescent lights, its walls lined with posters about community trust and officer safety. Malcolm sat in a holding room, his hands uncuffed but his coat still stained with blood. Across from him, Holt leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his eyes boring into Malcolm like he could will the truth away. "You're good," Holt said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Carrying props, huh? Bet you've got a Medal of Honor in your other pocket." He smirked, but it was forced, his confidence fraying at the edges. Malcolm didn't answer. He sat still, his hands folded, his eyes fixed on a crack in the table. The badge, now in an evidence bag, sat between them, its presence a silent accusation. Ethan stood by the door, his face pale, his fingers twitching. He'd run the badge's serial number through the system, and the results had come back. Valid. Issued to Malcolm Everett, Associate Justice, U.S. Supreme Court, 2016. Captain, Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. The badge checks out. He's who it says he is. Holt's smirk vanished. He grabbed the evidence bag, holding it up as if he could disprove it by sheer will. This is a mistake, he growled. Systems glitch. Forgeries happen. You think a Supreme Court judge walks around looking like that? Malcolm finally spoke, his voice soft but piercing. I don't need you to believe me, he said. But you might want to ask yourself why you're so afraid I'm real. Holt's hand slammed the table, the sound echoing in the small room. Don't play games with me. You're no judge. You're a nobody, and I'm gonna prove it. Ethan stepped forward, his voice trembling but resolute. Sir, we need to call this in. Federal authorities. If he's who the system says, we're in deep. Shut up, Caldwell. Holt roared, his face red. You're new. You don't get it. These people, they pull stunts like this. Fake badges, fake stories. You let them fool you, you're done. Malcolm's eyes flicked to Ethan, a flicker of something, understanding maybe, or pity. You've got a choice, Officer Caldwell, he said. You can follow him or you can follow the truth. But you can't do both. Ethan's breath caught, his mind spinning. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Outside, the precinct's phones were ringing off the hook, reporters, activists, federal agents, all demanding answers. The TikTok video had gone viral, South Bend injustice trending globally. Protesters were gathering outside, their chants audible through the precinct's thick walls. Justice for Malcolm. No more lies. Holt grabbed the badge, shoving it into his pocket. You're staying here until I figure this out, he said, his voice low, dangerous. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Ethan lingered, his eyes on Malcolm, who sat as still as ever, his calm unshaken. I'm sorry, Ethan whispered, barely audible. I didn't know. Malcolm nodded just once. You know now, he said. What you do with that is up to you. By dusk, Franklin Avenue was a battleground of ideals. Protesters filled the street, their signs high. No justice, no peace. Malcolm Everett is not trash. Across from them, a smaller group waved American flags, shouting, Back the blue. News vans lined the curb, their cameras capturing every shouted insult, every raised fist. A helicopter buzzed overhead, its spotlight sweeping the crowd. Lila Navarro, 33, a freelance journalist with a reputation for digging where others wouldn't, stood at the edge of the protest, her phone recording. She'd seen the TikTok video, read the comments, and knew this wasn't just another story. This was a reckoning. She uploaded a quick post to her blog. South Bend PD arrests a black man with a Supreme Court badge. They called him trash. The truth is about to call them out. Her post went viral, shared by activists, lawyers, and ordinary people who'd had enough. By nightfall, Lila had a lead. A leaked internal memo from the South Bend PD, dated 2011, mentioning an officer named Calvin Holt and a case involving a black teenager, Jaden Carter. The memo was vague, but one line stood out. Incident resolved internally. No further action required. Lila's fingers flew across her keyboard, her heart racing. She didn't know who Malcolm Everett was, not yet, but she knew Jaden Carter's name. Everyone in South Bend did. A 17-year-old shot dead in his backyard, holding nothing but a soda can. The officer was cleared, the case buried. And now, 14 years later, the man who tried to fight for Jaden was bleeding on a sidewalk, his badge kicked like garbage. As the crowd's chants grew louder, Lila made a decision. She'd find the truth, no matter the cost. She sent a message to a contact at the Department of Justice. I have something on South Bend PD. It's big. Help me verify. Back at the precinct, Malcolm sat alone, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. His knee throbbed, his coat still damp with blood, but his mind was clear. He'd been here before, not in this room, but in this moment, facing a system that saw him as less than human. He reached into his memory to a time when he'd stood in courtrooms, argued before judges, fought for justice he believed was possible. That man was still inside him, waiting. Outside, the world was waking up. Protesters lit candles, their glow pushing back the darkness. News anchors broke into primetime broadcasts, their voices urgent. A former Supreme Court nominee detained in South Bend. Questions of race and power explode. Social media burned with outrage, memes and calls to action. A young girl, the one who'd grabbed the badge, posted a photo of it on Instagram, her caption simple. "This is real. He is real." Malcolm closed his eyes, the chants filtering through the precinct's walls. He didn't smile, didn't cry. He just waited, as he always had, for the moment when the truth would demand to be heard. And in South Bend, on a night that would never be forgotten, that moment was coming. The night after Malcolm Everett's brutal detention on Franklin Avenue, South Bend, Indiana, thrummed with a restless electric pulse. The city, once a quiet tapestry of Midwestern routine, had become a crucible of rage, fear, and unanswered questions. The TikTok video, a grainy, heart-wrenching clip of Officer Calvin Holt shoving a black man with a Supreme Court badge against a cafe's glass wall, had detonated across the internet, amassing 12 million views in less than 24 hours. Hashtags like South Bend Injustice and Free Malcolm Everett trended worldwide, igniting debates on X, Instagram, and every cable news channel. Outside the South Bend Police Department, protesters gathered under a heavy July sky, their chants slicing through the humid air. No justice, no peace. Let Malcolm go. News vans choked the streets, their satellite dishes rising like vultures over a city teetering on the edge of chaos. Inside the precinct's holding room, Malcolm Everett, 47, sat under the glare of fluorescent lights, his bloodied knee untreated, his frayed coat clinging to his shoulders like a badge of endurance. His face was calm, his deep black eyes unyielding, as if the world's weight couldn't break him. Across the room, Officer Ethan Caldwell, 28, stood by the door, his hands restless, his gaze flickering between Malcolm and the evidence bag on the table. Inside it lay the scratched metal badge, engraved with United States Supreme Court Associate Justice, active clearance, Federal Code 11 BA, silent accusation that burned hotter than any shout. Officer Calvin Holt, 52, had stormed out hours ago, his venomous words echoing. "Black folks faking badges now, huh?" But the badge wasn't fake, and Ethan knew it. The precinct's database had confirmed it. Malcolm Everett, former federal prosecutor, Supreme Court nominee in 2016. A man who'd vanished after challenging a system that didn't want to be challenged. Outside, Franklin Avenue had morphed into a battlefield of ideals. By dawn, the crowd swelled to hundreds, their signs a kaleidoscope of fury and hope. Malcolm is not trash. End police brutality. Photos of Jaden Carter, a 17-year-old black teenager shot dead by police in 2011, dotted the protest, his yearbook smile a gut-punch reminder of a case buried but never forgotten. Across the street, counter-protesters waved American and Indiana state flags, their shouts sharp and unyielding. "Back the blue! Keep South Bend safe!" The divide was stark, two visions of America glaring at each other, separated by a flimsy line of yellow police tape. The air crackled, every glance a spark waiting to ignite. Lila Navarro, 33, a freelance journalist with a reputation for unearthing truths others shied away from, stood at the protest's edge, her phone recording the swelling tide. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy bun, her eyes sharp, scanning the crowd like a hawk. Lila had spent the night digging, her laptop glowing with leaked documents, old court filings, and news archives. Her latest blog post, South Bend Shame. A judge humiliated, a city silenced, had gone viral, shared by activists, amplified by influencers, and debated on morning talk shows. But Lila wasn't after fame. She was after justice. Her phone buzzed with a message from a Department of Justice contact. Confirmed. Malcolm Everett was a federal prosecutor, nominated for the Supreme Court in 2016. Disappeared after the Jaden Carter case. Keep digging. Lila's pulse quickened. Jaden Carter, a name that haunted South Bend like a ghost. A black teenager gunned down in his backyard, holding a soda can mistaken for a weapon. The officer was cleared, the case sealed, and the prosecutor who dared to fight Malcolm Everett was quietly erased from the system. Now 14 years later, that same man was bleeding on a sidewalk, his badge kicked like garbage. Lila uploaded a new post, her fingers flying. Malcolm Everett isn't just a victim. He's proof of a system that crushes those who challenge it. Jayden Carter's case holds the answers. Who's hiding the truth? Within minutes, the post racked up thousands of shares, comments flooding in. This is bigger than South Bend. Expose them, Lila. By noon, Franklin Avenue was a sea of humanity, the crowd ballooning to over 1,000. Protesters chanted Malcolm's name, their voices a rhythmic war drum. College students unfurled a massive banner. Justice for Jayden, justice for Malcolm. Families joined, clutching candles despite the midday heat, their faces etched with grief and defiance. A mother, her voice raw, shouted through a megaphone, "My son was stopped last week for walking home from school. This ends now." Across the street, counter-protesters grew louder, their ranks bolstered by local business owners, off-duty cops, and men in tactical vests. A man in a red cap bellowed, "You're tearing this city apart. The police keep us safe." A woman beside him held a sign, "Order is freedom." Then chaos erupted. A flare, bright and hissing, arced through the air, launched from the counter-protesters' side. It landed in the pro-Malcolm crowd, sparking panic. Screams pierced the air as people scattered, the acrid smell of smoke choking the street. A young man tripped, his sign "No More Jayden Carters" crushed underfoot. Police in riot gear surged forward, batons raised, tear gas canisters clanking at their belts. Lila, coughing as the gas stung her eyes, kept her phone steady, live streaming the mayhem. "This is South Bend," she shouted, her voice hoarse. "They're gassing peaceful protesters. Share this now." Her stream hit 75,000 viewers, comments exploding. "This is a police state. Where's the mayor?" Inside the precinct, Ethan watched the chaos unfold on a monitor, his stomach twisting. The chants "Let Malcolm go" seeped through the walls, a relentless tide. He glanced at Malcolm, still seated, his eyes closed as if in prayer. "How do you stay so calm?" Ethan asked, his voice barely a whisper. Malcolm opened his eyes, his gaze piercing. "I've been here before," he said. "Not this room, but this moment. You learn to wait when you know the truth is coming." Ethan swallowed, his mind flashing to the badge, the video, the blood on Malcolm's knee. He joined the force to protect, not to stand by while a man like this was humiliated. But Holt's voice echoed, "Don't get fooled, Caldwell. These people are great actors." Ethan's radio crackled, an order to join the riot control team outside. He hesitated, his hand frozen on the receiver. Malcolm's eyes met his, a silent question. "What will you choose?" That afternoon, Lila sat in a dimly lit coffee shop, her laptop open, her eyes bloodshot from sleeplessness. She'd received an anonymous email, a scanned memo from the South Bend PD, dated 2011, signed by Calvin Holt. It labeled Jayden Carter a potential threat, based on suspicious behavior, near a shopping district. No evidence, no charges, just a vague warning that flagged Jayden for surveillance. Days later, he was dead. Lila's hands trembled as she typed a new article. Officer Calvin Holt targeted Jayden Carter before his death. Is he doing the same to Malcolm Everett? She attached the memo, knowing it would light a fuse. Before publishing, she sent a copy to her to contact. "This is dynamite. Protect my source." The article dropped at 3 p.m., spreading like wildfire. Ex-users shared screenshots. CNN anchors read excerpts on air. An activist demanded Holt's suspension. By evening, the mayor's office issued a tepid statement. "We are reviewing the allegations and urge calm." But calm was impossible. Protesters outside the precinct tripled, their candles joined by photos of Jayden, Malcolm, and others lost to police violence. A makeshift memorial sprang up, Jayden's yearbook photo surrounded by flowers, a note pinned beside it. "We won't forget you." Lila's phone buzzed with a chilling message. "Stop digging, or you'll regret it." No sender, just a blocked number. She stared at the screen, her heart pounding but didn't flinch. She tweeted, "Threats won't silence the truth. South Bend injustice." The tweet went viral, but the threats didn't stop. That night, her apartment's front door was scratched with a single word. "Watch." Malcolm, still in the holding room, received his own warning. A plain envelope slid under the door, unnoticed by the guards. Inside was a single bullet and a note. Withdraw or this fines you. Malcolm read it, his expression unchanging, and tucked it into his coat. He'd faced threats before and signed letters, whispered warnings, the quiet menace of a system that wanted him gone. This was just another chapter in a story he'd lived too long. Ethan's life was unraveling faster. His ex-video, I'm Officer Ethan Caldwell. I was there when Malcolm Everett was detained. I should have done more. I'm sorry. Had gone viral, earning praise from some, but hate from others. His mailbox overflowed with venom. Traitor. You're no cop. At 2 a.m., someone threw red paint across his apartment window. The word betrayer, scrawled in dripping letters. Ethan's wife, Sarah, found him staring at the paint, his fists clenched. We can't stay silent, she said, her voice steel. Not after this. Ethan nodded, but fear gnawed at him. A second note arrived that morning. Your kid won't have a dad if you keep talking. The next morning, Malcolm was released. Said no charges, no apology, just a curt you're free to go. But freedom came with a spotlight. Reporters swarmed him outside the precinct, microphones thrusting forward. Are you suing the police? Will you demand justice? Malcolm raised a hand, silencing them. I'm not here for revenge, he said, his voice hoarse but steady. I'm here so no one else has to stand where I stood. He announced an open dialogue at the South Bend Public Library that evening, inviting everyone: protesters, cops, skeptics. The city held its breath. The library's community room, with its flickering fluorescent lights and rows of plastic chairs, became a crucible. Over 200 people packed inside, their faces a mosaic of anger, hope, and doubt. Malcolm sat at the edge of the circle, not at the center, his notebook in hand, his eyes scanning the room. A single mother spoke first, her voice trembling. I taught my son to avoid police before I taught him to tie his shoes. That's not right. A high school student, barely 16, took the mic next. I get stopped every week because my hoodie's too big. I'm not a criminal. I'm a kid. The room murmured, heads nodding, some eyes glistening. Then a young officer, still in uniform, stood. The crowd tensed, hands gripping chair arms. I've seen things, he said, his voice cracking. Officers bending rules, targeting people who don't fit. I stayed quiet because I needed this job. I'm sorry. His words hung heavy, a confession that cracked the room's silence. But not everyone was ready to hear it. A protester, his face flushed with rage, hurled a chair toward the officer. It crashed against the wall, splintering the air. Gasps erupted, people scrambling back. Malcolm stood, his presence a quiet command. Enough, he said, not loud but firm. We're here to talk, not to break. If you can't do that, leave. The protester hesitated, then sat, his fists still clenched. The officer, pale but steady, nodded at Malcolm. The dialogue resumed, voices rising and falling, pain and truth spilling like water from a cracked dam. Lila, in the back, recorded it all, her live stream hitting 150,000 viewers. This is South Bend tonight, she captioned. People are speaking. Are you listening? By the third day, South Bend was a city split in two. Protests grew, spilling beyond Franklin Avenue to City Hall, where candles and photos lined the steps. Jaden's memorial drew crowds, some kneeling in silence, others weeping openly. But counter-protests swelled too, their rhetoric sharper, their signs more aggressive. Cops aren't the enemy. Stop dividing us. A local news station, once neutral, aired a segment questioning Malcolm's past, their anchor's voice slick. Malcolm Everett, once a federal prosecutor, was investigated for destabilizing judicial proceedings in 2016. Hero or troublemaker? The claim was false, the investigation was dropped, but doubt took root. Lila fought back, publishing a new article, South Bend PD's smear campaign, burying the truth. She included a leaked document showing Holt's history of excessive force complaints, all dismissed. The article sparked outrage but also retaliation. Lila's apartment was vandalized, her car's tires slashed. She didn't stop. If they're scared, I'm on the right track, she told a friend, her voice steady but her hands shaking. That night her phone rang, a distorted voice hissing, "You're next." She hung up, her heart racing but kept working. Ethan faced his own crucible. His colleagues shunned him, their whispers cutting deeper than any paint on his window. Caldwell's a snitch. At home, Sarah showed him a third letter. Your family's not safe. Ethan's heart sank, but Sarah's resolve was iron. We're not backing down, she said. Not for them, not for anyone. Ethan made a choice. He met Lila in a deserted parking lot, handing her a flash drive. This is from the precinct's archive, he said, his voice low. Reports Holt tried to bury. It's not much, but it's a start. Lila nodded, her respect for him growing. You're risking everything, she said. Ethan shrugged, his eyes haunted. I already lost myself once. I'm not doing it again. Malcolm, now a reluctant symbol, walked South Bend streets at night, his coat still torn, his notebook filled with names: Jaden Carter, Elias Monroe, others lost to silence. He didn't seek the spotlight, but it found him. Reporters camped outside his temporary apartment, their questions relentless. He answered once, his voice cutting through the noise. This isn't about me. It's about a system that buries truth and calls it justice. On the fourth day, Malcolm held a second dialogue at a community center, the room larger, the crowd more diverse: cops, teachers, students, even counter-protesters. He stood at the back, his presence quiet but undeniable. A retired teacher spoke, her voice trembling. I've lived here 40 years. I've never seen a black man treated like Malcolm was, not on Franklin Avenue. This isn't about one man. It's about all of us. A counter-protester, a burly man in a flannel shirt, stood. You're making this about race. Holt was doing his job. You can't cry racism every time a cop does something you don't like. The room tensed, murmurs rising. Malcolm stepped forward, his eyes locking on the man. You're right, he said, his voice calm. It's not just about race. It's about power. Power that lets a man like me be called trash, my badge kicked, my blood on the pavement because someone decided I didn't belong. Tell me, sir, when was that you? The man opened his mouth, then closed it, his face reddening. The room fell silent. Malcolm's words a blade that cut through denial. Lila, live streaming, whispered to her audience. This is why he's dangerous to them. He doesn't shout. He makes you see. As the dialogue ended, a 7-year-old girl, Sophie Brennan, approached Malcolm. Her blonde hair was tied with a ribbon, her hands clutching a drawing. A circle of people holding hands, a badge at the center. This is for you, she said, her voice small but clear. So you know we're with you. Malcolm knelt, taking the drawing. Thank you, Sophie, he said, his voice soft. Keep drawing. Keep seeing. The moment, captured by Lila's camera, went viral, shared with captions like Hope in South Bend, and This is Change. But the city was fracturing. A local radio host, known for stoking division, called Malcolm a professional victim, his words fueling online hate. Counter-protesters grew bolder, their rallies drawing men in tactical gear, their rhetoric veering into threats. Lila uncovered a third document, a 2008 internal review recommending Holt for sensitivity training after a complaint from a black family. The training was never completed. She published it, knowing the risks. That night, her apartment's windows were smashed, glass glittering on her floor. She didn't stop. Ethan's resolve hardened. He posted a second video, his voice steadier. I saw a man's dignity stripped away and I did nothing. I won't stay silent anymore. The video drew support but also a brick through his car window. Sarah, holding their toddler, said, We're in this together. Ethan nodded, but fear lingered. By week's end, South Bend was a powder keg. The mayor announced an independent investigation, but few trusted it. Protests continued, their candles a permanent fixture at City Hall. A memorial for Jaden grew, photos of other victims joining his. Counter-protesters chanted, Support the police. A news segment smeared Malcolm, hinting at a troubled past. Lila's articles pushed back, but threats followed her like shadows. Ethan's family lived under siege, their courage tested daily. Malcolm, the eye of the storm, kept moving. He organized a third dialogue at a high school, inviting students. A 15-year-old boy asked, How do you keep going? Malcolm paused, then said, I don't fight for me. I fight for you so you don't have to bleed on a sidewalk someday. The boy nodded, his eyes wide, a seed of courage planted. As South Bend braced for what came next, a storm was brewing, not just in the city, but across America. Malcolm's blood, Jaden's smile, Sophie's drawing, they were no longer local. They were a mirror, forcing a nation to confront its reflection. And in that mirror Malcolm Everett stood, not as a hero, not as a victim, but as a question. What will you do when the truth demands a price? South Bend, Indiana, in late July 2025, was a city holding its breath. The firestorm sparked by Malcolm Everett's brutal detention on Franklin Avenue had consumed the nation, its embers spreading through viral videos, hashtags, and nightly news. The TikTok clip of Officer Calvin Holt shoving a black man, a former Supreme Court nominee, against a cafe window had surpassed 20 million views. Its raw truth a mirror America couldn't turn away from. Protests swelled, their candles and signs a permanent scar on City Hall's steps. Counter-protests draped in flags and defiance shouted back, splitting the city into two warring truths. The air was thick with tension, every glance a potential fuse, every silence a confession. Inside the South Bend Police Department, the mood was a cocktail of fear and denial. Officers whispered in hallways, their eyes darting to locked doors where internal reviews were underway. Malcolm Everett, 47, was no longer just a man in a torn coat. He was a living question mark, his scratched Supreme Court badge a symbol of a system caught in its own lies. Officer Ethan Caldwell, 28, walked those halls like a ghost, shunned by colleagues after his viral apology video. Officer Calvin Holt, 52, remained defiant, his office door closed, his name a curse on protesters' lips. Journalist Lila Navarro, 33, fueled the fire with leaked documents, her articles peeling back the department's secrets like skin from a wound. The city's pulse quickened when the mayor announced an independent commission to investigate the police department, granting it full access to internal records and the power to subpoena witnesses. But trust was scarce. Protesters demanded Holt's arrest, chanting Jaden Carter's name, a 17-year-old black teenager shot dead in 2011. His case buried until Malcolm's blood on the pavement brought it back. Malcolm himself had filed a federal lawsuit against the South Bend PD, not for personal gain, but to demand justice for Jaden and others erased by silence. The lawsuit's appendix, a chilling chart linking internal police alerts to unprosecuted shootings, sent shockwaves through the legal world, hinting at a machine built to evade accountability. Malcolm walked the city's edges, his presence a quiet storm. He organized dialogues, drawing hundreds to community centers and school gyms, where voices angry, broken, hopeful spilled out. A 7-year-old girl, Sophie Brennan, had given him a drawing of unity, its viral image a beacon of hope. But hope was fragile. Threats shadowed him, a bullet in an envelope, a whispered warning. Lila's apartment was vandalized, her car defaced. Ethan's family lived under siege, their windows smeared with paint, their mailbox stuffed with hate. South Bend wasn't just divided. It was a city at war with itself, and the truth was the battlefield. The investigation began in a basement archive room, where dust clung to files like secrets. A technician, Marcus Reed, 25, sat at a flickering monitor, tasked with pulling records from 2011, the year Jaden Carter died. His fingers typed commands, the system whirring, then froze. A red alert flashed. System error. Data unavailable. Marcus frowned, retrying. Another error, this time with a note. Archive zone surveillance disabled. April 28, 2025. His breath caught. April 28 was the day Harold Quinn, a retired archivist, had called the Department of Justice, promising evidence on falsified reports. The next day, Quinn was found dead in a roadside ditch, his traffic accident too convenient to believe. Marcus reported the glitch to his supervisor, a tight-lipped man who shrugged. Old system. Happens sometimes. But Marcus wasn't convinced. He slipped a note to Lila, meeting her in a deserted diner. The cameras were off, he whispered, his eyes darting. Someone's covering tracks. Lila's pulse raced. She published an article, South Bend PD's missing evidence. Was Harold Quinn silenced? The story exploded, fueling protests and drawing federal scrutiny. The DOJ sent agents to the precinct, their suits a stark contrast to the uniforms scurrying to hide. Lila's digging uncovered a bombshell, a 2005 case file on Elias Monroe, a black teenager found dead in a holding cell, ruled a suicide. A handwritten note, buried in the archives, read, handled internally, confirmed by Sergeant Calvin Holt. No autopsy, no footage, just Holt's signature. Lila's article. Another cover-up? Elias Monroe's death in Holt's shadow went viral, shared by millions. Protesters added Elias's photo to Jayden's memorial, their chants growing louder. No more lies. Justice now. The pressure broke the dam. On August 3, 2025, Calvin Holt was indicted falsifying records in Jayden Carter's case, concealing evidence, violating human rights, and systemic racial discrimination. The news hit South Bend like a thunderclap. Protesters cheered, their candles blazing brighter. Counter-protesters raged, calling it a witch hunt. Holt's arrest warrant was executed that night, his hands cuffed at his home, his face a mask of resignation. A neighbor overheard him mutter, "Didn't think it'd be him." No one asked who him was. They knew. The trial began 2 weeks later, broadcast live on national television, a first for South Bend. The courthouse, a gray monolith, stood under a cloudless sky, its steps lined with protesters and reporters. Inside the courtroom was a pressure cooker, every seat filled, every breath held. Dwight Rooker, looking older than his 52 years, sat behind a glass partition, his eyes hollow, his arrogance drained. The presiding judge, Eleanor Hayes, 65, a former legal advisor with a reputation for fairness, ordered all witnesses connected to Jayden Carter's case to testify, active or retired. The prosecution's first witness was Marcus Reed, the archivist. His voice trembled as he described the disabled cameras, the missing files. "Someone didn't want us to see 2011, he said, his eyes avoiding Holt's. The defense countered, claiming technical errors, but Marcus's testimony lingered, a crack in the system's facade. Next came a forensic analyst, revealing discrepancies in Jayden's case file. A missing neighbor's security video showing Jayden unarmed, a psychological report added post-mortem to justify the shooting. The courtroom murmured, jurors' faces tightening. Malcolm didn't testify on the first day, but his presence in the public gallery was electric. Dressed in a white shirt and dark vest, he held a notebook, his eyes scanning the room, not accusing but witnessing. A young journalist live streaming posted, "Malcolm doesn't need to speak. His silence is louder than any testimony." Outside, protesters watched on a giant screen in the central square, their candles flickering, their silence a shared prayer. On the second day, Ethan took the stand, his hands shaking, his uniform replaced by a plain suit. He faced Holt, his former mentor, and spoke. "I saw him erase a video from Jayden Carter's case. I didn't stop him. I was wrong." The courtroom gasped, Holt's jaw clenching. The defense attacked Ethan's credibility, dredging up a minor disciplinary note from his rookie year. But Ethan's raw honesty cut through. "I stayed silent once. I won't do it again." Protesters outside cheered, their voices filtering through the courthouse walls. Ethan stepped down, his eyes meeting Malcolm's, a nod of mutual respect passing between them. The trial's third day brought a bombshell. Lila Navarro was called as a witness, her evidence the Elias Monroe file. She held up the handwritten note, Holt's signature unmistakable. "This wasn't a suicide," she said, her voice steady. "It was a cover-up, and Holt was at the center." The courtroom froze, every eye on Holt. His lawyer objected, but Judge Hayes overruled, her voice sharp. "Let the record show the document's authenticity." Outside, the crowd roared, their chants shaking the square. Justice for Elias. Justice for Jayden. Then the unthinkable happened. Holt, unprompted, stood in the dock, his hands trembling. "I remember Elias Monroe," he said, his voice low, broken. "He didn't kill himself. He was beaten in that cell. No cameras, no witnesses. I rewrote the report." The courtroom erupted, gasps and shouts drowning the gavel's bang. Elias's mother, seated in the gallery, collapsed, her sobs echoing. Protesters outside stormed the courthouse doors, their fists pounding glass, their rage a tidal wave. Judge Hayes called for order, her voice cutting through. "Silence or I clear this room." Holt continued, his eyes on the floor. "I kept it quiet for 18 years, not because I thought I was right, but because I didn't know who I'd be if I admitted it. I'm not here for forgiveness. I just want to stop hiding." The confession was a grenade, its shrapnel tearing through the courtroom. Lila in the witness box gripped the railing, her eyes wide. Ethan in the gallery lowered his head, tears falling. Malcolm sat still, his notebook open, his pen unmoving. A journalist overheard him whisper, "The truth arrives late, but never too late." The prosecution seized the moment, presenting more evidence. Falsified reports in Jayden's case, internal memos flagging black teens as threats, Holt's signature on every one. A former colleague testified, his voice shaking. "Holt told us to clean files. We did it to protect the department." The defense faltered, their arguments crumbling under the weight of truth. Jurors' faces hardened, their notes piling up. On the fifth day, Malcolm was called to the stand. The courtroom fell silent, the air thick with anticipation. He walked forward, his white shirt crisp, his eyes calm but piercing. He faced the jury, not Holt, and spoke as if telling a story to a classroom. "I once believed this system could fix itself. I was a prosecutor nominated for the Supreme Court. But when I challenged Jayden Carter's case, every door closed. I wasn't fired. I was erased. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because Jayden was 17, unarmed, and deserved to live. If his name doesn't matter, whose does?" The jury leaned forward, some eyes wet. Malcolm paused, his voice softening. "Imagine Jayden was your son. Imagine he was shot for holding a soda can. Would you stay silent?" A juror, a middle-aged woman, wiped her cheek. Outside, the crowd was silent, their candles a sea of light on the screen. Malcolm stepped down, his words a weight no one could shake. The trial's sixth day was chaos. Protesters clashed with counter-protesters outside, a bottle shattering against a police shield. Inside, the prosecution played a 2011 audio of Holt's voice, calm and cold. "Carter's a problem. Handle it." The defense had no answer. Closing arguments came, the prosecution's voice ringing. "This isn't one man's crime. It's a system that let him thrive." The defense pleaded for leniency, citing Holt's service, but their words fell flat. On the seventh day, the jury deliberated for 6 hours. The verdict came at dusk. Guilty on all counts: falsifying records, concealing evidence, human rights violations, systemic discrimination. Holt stood, his face empty as cuffs clicked around his wrists. Outside, protesters erupted in cheers, their candles raised like torches. Counter-protesters shouted, their flags drooping. News anchors broke into broadcasts. Historic verdict in South Bend. Justice served, but at what cost? Malcolm left the courthouse quietly, avoiding cameras. Lila followed, her phone off for the first time in weeks. "Why no statement?" she asked. Malcolm glanced at her, his voice soft. "Justice isn't a speech. It's what happens when a system admits it was wrong." Ethan watched from a distance, his suit rumpled, his heart lighter. He'd testified, risked everything, and found something he'd lost, himself. But the city wasn't healed. That night, Malcolm's apartment was a Takeda Molotov cocktail shattering his window, flames licking the curtains. He doused the fire with an extinguisher, his hands steady, but a photo frame burned, its image of a young boy, Jayden, perhaps charred at the edges. The police arrived late, their report vague. Vandalism under investigation. Malcolm didn't move. "If I leave," he told Lila, "they'll burn someone else's home next." The community responded with a vigil outside Malcolm's building, thousands strong, their candles a glowing shield. Sophie Brennan, 7, stood at the front, holding a new drawing, a badge surrounded by hands. "We're here for you," she said, her voice carrying over the crowd. The image went viral, shared with captions, "South Bend's heartbeats for justice." The trial's fallout rippled. The commission reopened Jayden's case, naming 3 judges who'd approved its closure. A former police chief, Raymond Holt, faced scrutiny for signing off on falsified alerts. Lila published a final article, "The System That Killed Jayden. Who's next?" It drew threats but also support letters from mothers, students, even cops saying, "Keep going." Ethan joined the commission as a consultant, his testimony shaping reforms. He received a note and signed, "You stood. Don't stop." He suspected Malcolm but never asked. Malcolm himself vanished from the spotlight, his lawsuit ongoing, his dialogues quieter but unbroken. He visited Jayden's memorial, leaving a single candle, his notebook filled with new names: victims, survivors, those still waiting. South Bend changed, not with a bang but with a slow awakening. High school students painted a mural of Jayden, Elias, and Malcolm. its colors vivid against City Hall's gray. A community center named a room for Sophie, her drawing framed on the wall. The police department, under new leadership, began training officers in ethics, Ethan's voice among them. But the war wasn't over. Threats lingered, files vanished, and silence beckoned. Malcolm knew this, walking South Bend streets at dawn, his coat patched, his badge in his pocket. He didn't seek victory, only memory, the kind that refused to be erased. And in a city learning to stand, his shadow was a quiet flame, lighting the way for those ready to carry it. South Bend, Indiana, in the fading light of August 2025, was a city transformed, yet still searching for its soul. The trial of Officer Calvin Holt had ended with a guilty verdict, a seismic shift that reverberated far beyond the courthouse walls. The viral video of Malcolm Everett, 47, a black man with a Supreme Court badge, shoved against a cafe window by Holt, had ignited a national reckoning, its 30 million views a testament to a truth America could no longer ignore. Protesters' candles still burned outside City Hall, their glow a quiet defiance against a system that had buried names like Jaden Carter and Elias Monroe. Counter-protesters, their flags now fewer, retreated to online forums, their anger simmering but muted. South Bend was no longer just a city, it was a mirror, reflecting a nation grappling with its past and its promise. Malcolm Everett, the man at the heart of the storm, had become a symbol, though he never sought the role. His federal lawsuit against the South Bend Police Department, demanding justice for Jadina, 17-year-old shot dead in 2011, and others, was ongoing, its evidence shaking the foundations of power. The independent commission, armed with subpoena authority, had reopened Jaden's case, naming judges and a former police chief complicit in its cover-up. Officer Ethan Caldwell, 28, once silent, now stood as a reformer, his testimony shaping new police ethics training. Journalist Lila Navarro, 33, continued her crusade, her articles a beacon for those seeking truth. And Sophie Brennan, 7, whose drawing of unity had gone viral, embodied a generation learning to speak before silence could take root. But transformation came with scars. Malcolm's apartment, scorched by a Molotov cocktail, stood as a reminder of the cost. Lila's car bore the marks of vandals, her inbox flooded with threats. Ethan's family lived under a shadow, their windows boarded after a brick shattered their peace. South Bend was awake, but awakening was painful, its streets heavy with memory and hope, its people learning to stand in a world that still pushed back. Malcolm moved quietly through this new South Bend, his torn coat patched, his notebook filled with names of the forgotten. He no longer sought the spotlight, his dialogues now smaller, held in church basements and school libraries. Yet his absence from the headlines only amplified his presence. Reporters speculated. Would he run for office? Rejoin the judiciary? Invitations piled up at his old legal office, now a dusty relic offers for governorship, a federal reform commission chair, even a book deal. Malcolm ignored them all, choosing instead to listen, to walk the city's edges, to sit with those whose voices had long been drowned out. One evening in a community center gym, Malcolm stood before 50 people, mothers, students, a few wary cops. A teenager, his voice cracking, asked, "How do you keep going when they hate you?" Malcolm paused, his eyes soft but steady. "I don't fight for their love," he said. "I fight for you so you don't have to bleed like I did." The room was silent, the boy's eyes wide, a spark of courage kindled. Lila, in the back, jotted it down, her pen a quiet witness. She'd stopped live streaming, her focus now on stories that didn't need a hashtag to endure. The city's healing began in small acts. High school students painted a mural on a downtown wall, its colors vivid. Jaden Carter's smile, Elias Monroe's eyes, Malcolm's badge. A plaque read, "We remember." At City Hall, the steps once littered with candles now held a permanent memorial. Names etched in stone: Jaden, Elias, and others lost to silence. Sophie Brennan, her blonde hair tied with a ribbon, organized a ceremony there, her small hands clutching a list of names. On a makeshift stage, she stood behind a microphone, her voice clear despite her 7 years. "These people didn't get to tell their stories," she said. "I'm reading their names so we don't forget." The crowd, 100 strong, held their breath as she read. Jaden Carter, Elias Monroe, Myra Santon, Jerome Lee. A man stepped forward, his face weathered, his eyes wet. "I'm Jaden's brother," he said, his voice breaking. He knelt, hugging Sophie, his sobs shaking the stage. The crowd wept, their candles flickering, their silence a shared vow. Lila captured the moment, her photo going viral with the caption, "South Bend's Heartbeats for Memory." News anchors replayed it, calling Sophie the voice of a generation. But Sophie back home taped her list to her bedroom wall, whispering, "I'll keep reading." Ethan, now a trainer at the Institute for Justice and Professional Ethics, a nonprofit Malcolm founded, carried the torch. The institute, housed in a renovated library, trained young officers in human rights and nonviolent response. Ethan's first class, 12 recruits in plain shirts, sat in a circle, their eyes wary. He began with a story, his voice steady. "I was there when Malcolm Everett was called trash, his badge kicked. I did nothing. That silence cost me myself." The recruits leaned forward, some taking notes, others nodding. Ethan ended with a question. "When did you last see something wrong and stay quiet?" By the session's end, a whiteboard at the back bore their answers. "I ignored a racist joke. I saw a stop that didn't feel right." One recruit, a young woman, wrote in bold red, "I won't be silent again." Ethan kept a note in his wallet, unsigned but in Malcolm's hand. "Silence is the system. Speaking is freedom. Teach them to choose right." He never read it aloud, but every lesson was his answer. His family, still healing, received a small gift, a child's drawing, mailed anonymously, showing a badge and a shield. Sarah framed it, whispering, "Someone's watching over us." Lila's work evolved. Her articles, now syndicated by a national outlet, dug into systemic wrongs beyond South Bend, cases of buried evidence, silenced victims. One piece, "The Names We Never Knew," listed 20 people killed in custody disputes, their stories untold until now. Readers sent letters, some from cops. "I want to do better." But threats persisted. A late-night call hissed, "You'll end up like Quinn." Lila hung up, her hands shaking, but published again, her words a defiance. "Truth doesn't die quietly." The city's wounds were raw, but signs of life emerged. A community theater staged a play, the badge on the ground, retelling Malcolm's story through local voices. A church choir sang a hymn for Jaden, its melody drifting over the plaza. At a middle school, students swore an oath. "We'll speak when it's hard." These acts, small yet stubborn, wove a new South Bend, one that remembered its pain but refused to let it define the future. Malcolm, sensing the shift, began to fade from view. He stopped appearing at vigils, his dialogues dwindling. One night he walked to Jaden's memorial, leaving a single candle and a note. "I still see you." Reporters searched but found no Tricino address, no digital footprint. Rumors swirled. He'd left for a northern lake. He was writing a memoir. He was hiding from threats. The truth was simpler. Malcolm didn't want to be found. His work was done, the light now carried by others. Yet his presence lingered in unexpected ways. Across South Bend, people received handwritten letters, plain envelopes with no return address. Inside, a single line, "I still remember." A mother who'd lost her son to police violence found one on her porch, dated the anniversary of his death. A man, wrongfully jailed for months, discovered one under his door. A young woman whose father was humiliated in a stop, opened one in her new city, tears falling. No signature, but they knew. Malcolm's memory was a quiet flame, refusing to flicker out. One morning in South Bend Central Park, a boy 10 with brown skin and worn sneakers played near a stone bench, the same bench where Malcolm once read. Between its cracks, something glinted. He pried it loose. A metal badge, scratched and heavy, its engraving faded but clear. United States Supreme Court. The boy turned it over, his eyes wide, sensing its weight was more than metal. He ran to his mother, a woman with gentle but fierce eyes, sitting on the grass. "Mom, what's this?" he asked, holding it out. She took it, her breath catching. She'd seen this badge before, kicked across a sidewalk, its owner bleeding under a cop's grip. She'd learned his name later, Malcolm Everett, the man who'd made South Bend see itself. Now she held his legacy, not to keep but to pass on. "It's justice," she said, placing it in her son's palm. Not the metal, but why it was stepped on and still picked up. The boy frowned, his fingers tracing the scales engraved on it. "What's justice, Mom?" he asked. She paused, choosing words carefully. knowing this wasn't a question for dictionaries but for lived truth. Justice is when someone like you with your skin doesn't have to fear a police car. It's when you stand tall not to fight but because you deserve to. And if you see someone forced to bow, you do something even if it's just standing still. The boy nodded, clutching the badge. "Can I do justice?" he asked, his voice small but sure. His mother smiled, pulling a notebook from her bag, handing him a pen. "Start here," she said. "Write what you believe." He opened it, his hand steady, and wrote, "Justice is when I don't stay quiet about what's wrong." They left the park, the boy leading, the badge warm in his pocket. As they passed a patrol car, he didn't flinch, his head high, his mother's hand in his. South Bend's story didn't end with a verdict or a mural. It lived in those who chose to act. Sophie reading names, Ethan teaching truth, Lila writing fearlessly, a boy holding a badge. Malcolm's absence was his final gift, a space for others to step forward. The institute grew, drawing officers from across states, its classes a crucible for change. A new memorial rose, not for Malcolm, but for all who'd been silenced, its stone inscribed, "We speak for those who cannot." The city's future was uncertain. Threats lingered, files vanished, silence beckoned. But South Bend had learned to stand, its people a tapestry of courage and memory. Malcolm, wherever he was, left a question: what will you do with the badge you hold, visible or not? And in a park under an oak's shadow, a boy's notebook held the answer. Its first line a promise for a world still learning to be just. Picture this. It's a quiet evening in South Bend, Indiana, 2025, and you're scrolling through your phone, maybe sipping a coffee or dodging your dog's enthusiastic attempts to steal your snack. You stumble across a story: a man named Malcolm Everett, his badge kicked across a sidewalk, his dignity tested by a system that judged him before it saw him. It's not just a story. It's a wake-up call. A mirror held up to a world that's still figuring out what justice really means. And now here you are at the end of this journey, holding an invisible badge of your own. So what's next? Let's talk about it. This story isn't locked in South Bend or frozen in 2025. It's alive right here, right now in your world. Think about it. How many times have you seen someone judged for how they look, their clothes, their skin, their vibe? Maybe it was a coworker passed over for a promotion, a kid stopped on the street for looking suspicious, or even you feeling eyes on you in a place you didn't belong. In 2025, America's still wrestling with these shadows: racial bias, power imbalances, the silence that lets wrongs fester. X posts and TikTok rants light up with outrage, but change? That starts with us, in the small moments when we choose to speak or stay quiet. Malcolm didn't need a courtroom to make a difference. He stood tall on a sidewalk, and that's where we can start too. Here's the lesson. Justice isn't a finish line or a gavel's bang. It's a choice made every day to see people as they are, not as we're told they should be. Malcolm chose to remember names like Jaden Carter and Elias Monroe, to carry their stories when the world forgot. Ethan Caldwell chose to break his silence, risking everything to right a wrong. Sophie Brennan, all of 7 years old, chose to read names aloud, her voice a spark for a generation. And that boy in the park, clutching Malcolm's badge? He chose to ask, "Can I do justice?" The answer's yes, for him, for you, for all of us. It's not about capes or headlines. It's about refusing to look away when the truth demands your gaze. Now for a bit of humor with a side of truth. Fighting for justice is like trying to convince your grandma you don't need seconds of her famous meatloaf at Thanksgiving. It's tough, it's messy, and you might ruffle feathers, but deep down, you know it's worth it because it's about love for fairness, for people, for a better world. So next time you see something off, a snide comment, an unfair rule, a sideways glance that says, "You don't belong," channel your inner Malcolm and say, "Not on my watch." It's less calories than meatloaf and way more satisfying. Let's get real for a second. Have you ever stayed silent when you knew something was wrong? Maybe it was easier, safer, or just not your fight. We've all been there. But here's a question to chew on. If you were in South Bend that day, standing in that crowd, would you have picked up Malcolm's badge or walked away? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious to hear your story. And while you're at it, what's one small thing you can do today to make your corner of the world a little more just? Maybe it's calling out a bad joke, listening to someone's pain, or just asking like that boy did, "What's justice?" Before you scroll on to the next viral cat video, no judgment, they're adorable, Hit that subscribe button for Echoes of Justice. We're diving deep into stories like Malcolm's Raw, real and packed with heart. You don't want to miss the next one, trust me. Plus, joining our community means you're part of something bigger. A movement to keep the truth alive, one story at a time. So subscribe, share, and let's keep the conversation going. Because justice starts with us right here, right now.